Option D is we specify those zones and we add setback controls. And option E is that we just prohibit cannabis retail sales outright in the county. So another aspect of this report is to look at our existing policy framework around production and processing. We've had this policy in place now since March of this year, and it's going very well. We've had quite a few applications and inquiries come in for new facilities that are wanting to establish themselves in Norfolk County, and so the setback controls that we've put into our bylaw are being effective in that sense. The applications that have come in for pre-consultation, we're implementing our site plan control measures. So through site plan control, we're requiring the necessary buffers, and we're making sure those land use conflicts don't pop up. We have looked at some of our existing, that existing policy and have identified that we could use some additional sensitive land uses to be added to that policy in order to have the buffers be there for things like campgrounds, group homes, hotel, long-term care facilities, a mobile home park, place of assembly, entertainment, and sports and recreation, a tent and trailer park, a tourism cabin, or hospital. These are all things where people would reside or stay or find accommodation in. So this is something that we're hoping to add to our existing policy just to tighten it up a little bit to make sure that, again, that those land use conflicts don't arise. And again, some of the other items that we've looked at as part of this report is the option for a cannabis retail business license. This is something that communities in Canada are considering as part of a revenue source, and in addition to that, ways of creating, again, some more buffering frameworks. From my understanding, if the province does go with a private retail sales channel, we would still have the ability to implement a cannabis retail business license. And the last item that the report addresses is an odor control bylaw update. And my update there is that the county solicitor has drafted that bylaw, and we are working internally just to find out if there are any comments internally for it. Staff's recommendation today is that the privatization of cannabis retail sales stay as we interpret it today, in that it is option A. We are just looking at it like a regular retail use, and that is very similar to how we address things like tobacco and alcohol sales. We don't right now explicitly zone for alcohol or tobacco. They can occur in any retail store, so we're addressing it the same way. Some of the issues that may arise as part of trying to zone for cannabis retail sales is the idea of people zoning. It's something that we want to try to avoid. It's very similar to the same argument that we had for the opioid replacement therapy clinics. So planning staff are recommending that we follow option A, and again, that's that cannabis retail stores are just a regular retail store. And finally, we're looking for direction from council to add to our existing cannabis policy the list of sensitive land uses that are identified in the report. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vaughn, for that report. Councillor Black, these are questions to our staff.
Mayor Luke, thank you very much, and through you too, staff. Just looking at page 49, and right at the top of the page 5 of the report, province has also indicated they plan to provide the ability for municipalities to opt out of marijuana retail sales, similar to dry alcohol prohibition. Could you explain that one further, and why isn't that an option?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the province has given us a one-time chance to basically prohibit the retail sale of cannabis in Norfolk County. In terms of prohibition, it would be basically the idea of creating a dry zone in all of the county. That exists in part for the county in certain zones now for alcohol. In terms of the prohibition, it would be a different mechanism to do that instead of through zoning. Option E, which is the idea of prohibiting it outright, is the closest option you have to prohibiting it in the county, at least through zoning. That wouldn't stop someone from coming in with a zoning bylaw amendment later to seek relief from the bylaw to have it established on their site. If the county chose to take the route of prohibiting it in the entire county and creating the county as a dry zone, my understanding, and perhaps the county clerk can correct me, is that it would require a referendum and a much larger scale public consultation process. But perhaps he can weigh in on that.
You wish to comment?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think one of the things right now is certainly the uncertainty around what the provincial government is going to do. They may allow a simple motion for council to ban this. They seem desirous to get something in place well before April of 2019 on the retail sales. So it might, what we're hearing currently is that it might be you are forced to either opt in or opt out. So council might have to make a choice. But certainly it would be remiss of me not to mention that the dry area in Long Point and the damp area in Simcoe are two significant areas of concern for us now, and we're currently working on a proposal to bring to the next term of council to run a referendum to address those areas, because at the time they were put in place for good reasons, but now they're kind of very antiquated and they cause a lot of problems for businesses trying to operate in the areas. So there will be a cost to the municipality to try to remove those alcohol areas.
Okay, thank you for that. And just, I guess the problem I'm having is there no other option like pilot project? I mean, we're hearing that the province even doesn't know what's happening. It would be nice if we could experience from somebody else first, or even just a small area in Norfolk County, wherever that might be opposition to even that. But I'm really uncertain about this, and the feedback I'm getting is from people it's uncertainty. So is there no way that we could either just put it on hold and see how another municipality, how it works out for another municipality, and maybe by then the province will have their act together in a more firm way?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So option A does that in a way. Option A is the option where we don't do anything and we continue to interpret it as a regular retail use. Staff is very open to any direction that council would like to give staff. We can bring any form of bylaw forward that you wish.
Thank you. Councillor Columbus?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple questions here. Matt, how many cannabis grow-ops are there in Norfolk County?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that answer is a little difficult because there is the difference between a legal production facility and one that's not. We know of 3 licensed, site plan approved facilities in Norfolk County today, and we have a number of other potential licensed facilities that are going to be coming online within the next year, and again, they've all gone through the planning process. That being said, there are a number of designated or alternative production sites that we're aware of. The number as of right now is likely in the 50s. So the scale of the Part 2 facility is really getting out there at this time. But in terms of legal, licensed, approved, and regulated facility, right now it's 3.
I always said that we'd be the cannabis capital. Here we are. And how much staff time is being spent on cannabis? Your time and bylaw, and I know we hear it regularly, people concerned about odors, so how
yeah.
much time is being spent?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I receive phone calls for a while there. It was daily. So there is a lot of planning staff resource time going into this. There is a lot of bylaw staff time going into this as well. We are aware of several facilities that are causing some major land use conflicts in the county, and we are addressing those through bylaw enforcement right now. We'll see how those go, but the result of those, the bylaw follow-up would be to continue to do that with all of the facilities that don't exist, that don't have planning approval.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and I apologize to staff for turning my back to them, but I do want to refer to the report. Mr. Mayor, as I read through the report, and in particular, I'm looking at page 47 and 48, where it gives the review and rationale behind each of the options. I understand option A would be the simplest, essentially the status quo. My question, though, Mr. Mayor, with option B, and even more so with option C, I am concerned, I guess, that the rationale for not recommending either of those options from staff is just a concern over a possible challenge, either from the LPAT, the former OMB, or possibly a human rights challenge, if it's perceived somehow that we're people zoning. And yet, Mr. Mayor, if there's good rationale for restricting the zones, I would suggest we should go ahead with an option like that and take our chances with an appeal. So my first question to Matt, is there any other reason that staff are not recommending option B or option C other than a concern over a possible challenge by some higher court, so to speak?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Oliver has really hit the nail on the head. That's why we are not recommending any of the other options. Simply put, there could be an appeal based on the idea of people zoning. And the other part of that equation is, well, we don't have any science to back up what that required buffer would be. When we went through the process for the production and processing, there was a lot of staff time allocated to developing the science behind that buffer. Currently, right now, I'm not aware of the science to determine what a buffer should be for retail stores. So right now,
Okay.
that's why we're recommending option A.
Okay, and my final question for now, Mr. Mayor, if I could, and it relates to Matt's comments in response to a couple of other questions about the production facilities. We know we have 3 now that are approved. We're anticipating perhaps several dozen more under the Part 2 part within the next 12 months. Did staff consider as an option to allow the retail sale of cannabis at locations where the production or processing is also approved or may be approved in the future? In other words, we're restricting it to the zones where production is permitted.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the retail sale would be limited to the zones where those retail uses are permitted today. The MG zone does permit a level of retail sale, so it may occur within the MG zone or the general industrial zone. So that is where we're seeing some of these facilities establish themselves. However, in the agricultural zone, that would not be an option for retail sale, save and except those who would come in with a zoning bylaw amendment to request the use to be located there.
Councillor Brunton?
Thank you, Mayor Luca. Well, Councillor Oliver just asked my question, so I'm clear on that. These 3 that we have approved, at least the ones I'm thinking of, are they're really wholesale distributors, are they not? In a way, and are you saying that we now can, with our zoning bylaw, allow retail in one of those in the industrial areas? Is that possible, I guess?
Yeah. Through Mr. Mayor, one of those facilities is located in one of the county's industrial areas.
Right.
That facility, with the recommendation being option A, they would be able to establish retail sale out of that establishment as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Sonnenberg?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're obviously running into uncharted waters here, and I think it's going to be a real dog's breakfast when each municipality has a say into how cannabis is going to be handled. I mean, I wonder, have we looked far enough afield to places like Colorado and Oregon to see what they've done? Do the same rules there apply statewide, or do they vary from city to city and county to county like we're advocating here?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my understanding is they do differ from municipality to municipality, and they differ again from state to state. So it is also new. I think everybody's in the same position. Everybody's trying to figure out what the best formula is right now. Yeah, that's, you're correct.
Thank you. Councillor Black?
Mayor Luke, just update me on where are we at with the lesser regulated facilities, production facilities, and filtration. Are we able to require them to filter as we are with the more regulated one?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the way our current policy works today is that it regulates all forms of cannabis production or processing regardless of what type of facility it is, and that even includes outdoor production as well. So if you don't provide adequate air treatment control, then your required setback from a sensitive land use is 300 meters. If you do provide adequate air quality control, then your setback requirement is 150 meters. We have had several facilities come in proposing air quality control that has not met the standard for being enough air quality control, and therefore they automatically get the 300 meters. It has been an effective policy because those that have come in with that type of control have recessed their buildings further back so that they didn't conflict with some of those surrounding land uses. So it has been a very effective tool so far.
And how does that affect the ones that are already in production?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as council will recall, the existing up and running facilities that were not previously site plan approved, they have not received legal non-conforming status. They are simply just not conforming with our zoning bylaw, and at this point staff are actively pursuing bylaw enforcement on a number of those facilities.
Okay, thank you. Lastly, just on, I am already getting complaints, and maybe others are also, about smoking marijuana on the personal property or in the house. The smell wafts over to the next property. It's, it's like 10, 12 feet away. So how are we going to deal with that? Because I am positive that once this starts, those complaints are just going to come rolling in the same way the smoke is.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, odors like that are a tough thing for a zoning bylaw to regulate. It would be like trying to regulate tobacco smoke or barbecue smoke for that matter. The county will have to find other means of addressing that issue.
That's something that would be ongoing, and okay, because it's, I think as well, everyone knows that's going to be a problem.
Councillor Height, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Through you to planning. Mr. Vaughn, I'm looking at the differences between option A and option B for the retail sales policy. Now, option B has setbacks, and in option A, it doesn't say that there are setbacks, but it says it's similar to alcohol and tobacco. So are there no setbacks for having an LCBO beside a school?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there may be provincial requirements for that, but we don't have any municipal requirements for it today.
So how would we know about the provincial requirements? Because that's one of the biggest issues I have. You could have a retail store right up against a school, and they could be selling cannabis in it. That doesn't happen with the liquor store, so...
Yep, through you, Mr. Mayor, and I would hate to guess because it's likely I'll be wrong because I just don't know, but I am assuming the province will develop a similar policy framework for private cannabis sales as they have for alcohol sales, but without knowing, I can't say for sure.
Okay, then my question to you is how do we stop that from happening until they do that? Because it would be hard to get them out afterwards.
Yeah.
And I don't like the idea that we're going to have to go possibly to LPAT to solidify that decision, but I don't want to see a store right up against the school selling it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there are two ways that could be accomplished. So one of the ways is to choose option B and establish setback controls from institutional land uses. The other way would be through a business license, through business licensing. The Municipal Act does allow municipalities to require setbacks from different uses. But again, I would ask the clerk to confirm that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I just have one, Matt, on page 6 of your report, odor control bylaw update. Thank you for that. You state in here that the draft bylaw on odor is being circulating right now amongst our departments and will be presented before the end of the year. So it'll be probably coming in December to a new council. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's correct, Mr. Mayor. It would also, if this is something to address cannabis odors, it would be something that the Cannabis Task Force would also review. And it may be, that bylaw may also someday expand into more than just odors. It may also be nuisance driven as well. So there's a couple different avenues that can
Matt, is there any thoughts from you or hope that this odor bylaw will properly address what some of our residents, they're pushed right to the wall on this. They've had enough. And I'm just wondering, do you have confidence that maybe this can be helpful in solving this marijuana cannabis odor that we're all are very well aware of, that it's just not good? And
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. It acts as an additional tool in addition to the zoning that we have today. We're hopeful that it will help address the odor issues that are out in the agricultural and in other areas of the county as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Oliver, please. Thank
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just listening to Matt's final comment, I think in response to one of the other questions about the business license option, it suddenly a light bulb came on in my head. It seems to me in some respects, Mr. Mayor, that might be a really good option as a way of controlling it. So my question to staff, either Matt or perhaps the clerk, is do we have the authority to impose conditions on a certain type of business license? In other words, for anyone to get a business license to sell cannabis, they have to meet 1, 2, 3, 4 conditions, which could ultimately be setbacks from sensitive land uses, et cetera, et cetera. Is that within our legal right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the general principle that I think assists council the best is business licensing can't do what a zoning bylaw can do, and a zoning bylaw can't do what a business licensing do. So they really should be treated as separate concepts. So if you're talking about land usage, that's really a zoning issue. If you want to have, say, health inspections once a week at all of these retail stores, that's something a business license can do. And I think just in general terms, when we're talking about business licensing for marijuana, this would be probably our most rigorous. I don't think that there's any way that we could do a business license for something like a retail sales for marijuana without the cost being around $3,000 or $4,000 annually, because of the amount of inspections and oversight that we as a municipality would require of that function. So again, there'll be a further report on that when we get to that stage and know what the province is doing, but I don't think that this would be our routine business licensing if the province allows us to directly have the retail oversight. There's other jurisdictions where the provincial government has directly issued the license too. Whether or not there'll be 2 licenses for these or not is something the province really still has to determine.
Thank you for that, Mr. Clerk. That's certainly helpful to me. It seems to me, Mr. Mayor, that regardless of what's done with this report today, I think the business license at the appropriate time is going to be a way perhaps to help restrict the number of retail places. And boy, I know I should hesitate to say that, and I won't be here to have to help defend it, but you know, having a rigorous, as the clerk described it, a rigorous criteria for inspections for retail cannabis sale licenses issued may be a good thing, and with the associated fee. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to get to the motion, and we'll see if there's any discussion. Councillor Geisens has moved. Councillor Columbus has seconded that staff report DCS 1890, the privatization of cannabis retail sales and policy update be received as information, and that planning staff be directed to amend section 3.21 of the zoning bylaw 1Z 2014 and to add to the list of sensitive land uses that require separation distances from a cannabis production and processing use. Discussion on this motion. Councillor Oliver, please.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry to talk so much.
No,
but boy, oh
you're
boy,
in
this
order.
is a pretty pivotal decision we're making, and I think by approving this recommendation as it is, we're essentially saying option A is it, are we not? And that means it could be sold anywhere by anybody at any time. Or am I wrong about that?
Planning, do you want to just respond to that on his interpretation? Matt, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you're correct. And I'll add to that this is something that I don't think is necessarily going to stop at today's meeting. It's something that staff are going to continue to monitor as we get closer and closer to the April date. If something changes, it's very likely we'll be back to council with another report. But this is the decision you're ultimately making today.
My final comment, Mr. Mayor, it's harder to take something away after you've given it out than it is to withhold it in the first place.
Councillor Height, please, to the motion.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I don't see where we're selecting option A in this recommendation. I see that we talk about cannabis production and processing that requires the setbacks, but it doesn't say in here what option we're selecting or anything else on that. Like personally, I'd like to see more options as far as the business licensing go. I don't know that we need inspections or all the rest of the spiel. I don't think we do that for, say, a crematorium. It seems pretty straightforward, but I don't see here where we're picking a selection.
Well, I think, if I may, that section 3.21 of the zoning bylaw, we saw the permitted uses in that section, and then also on above that, we're going to add it to the list of the sensitive land uses. But staff may want to correct me if I'm wrong. Matt?
So the recommendation would be to leave the policy as it is today for retail sales, and that would mean that cannabis would be able to be sold in any of those uses listed in the report. I can back this up a bit. There. So right now, retail sales are permitted in any of these places, and these places are permitted in all of the listed zones here. So if you follow the recommendation as it says, as it's stated today, it would be to leave the zoning bylaw as it is. So retail sales for cannabis would be permitted in all of these zones with no setback requirements. However, if council would like to add anything to that, as in coming back with a business license or something like that, we can definitely look into that.
Mayor Luke, if I could ask planning staff, when do you think the province is going to come up with their stuff?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure. I'm hopeful before April, but we'll see. This decision is, like I said, was very different than what the original plan was.
So would it not be beneficial to defer this until then? Personally, I'd like more business licensing information, and I definitely don't want to see us get lit up here with 20 stores, even though Simcoe needs more stores. But without having that setback, I won't agree to having it beside a school, and that's what we'll do today if we move it forward.
Yep. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So if we were to defer it, it would be very similar to choosing option A because it leaves things as it is in the bylaw. So our interpretation, if a store were to come in now would be that it's permitted in those places and in those zones, so that part wouldn't really change if it was deferred. However, we are hoping on some direction on the second recommendation, which is adding those extra sensitive land uses to our existing policy.
Councillor Broughton?
Well, I've listened and I'm kind of a little bit confused. I don't like the idea of going that route now. I like to hear what the province really has to say. I don't have a problem, and I asked this question and when Councillor Oliver touched on it, and that is if we have I call it a wholesale operation, and they want to open up a minor retail in an industrial area, I don't have a problem with that for now. And again, as long as we can regulate it some way. But I do not want to go that route right now because, as Councillor Oliver said, once we open the door, it's pretty hard to shut it after that. So I'm a little uneasy with that. So I'm looking for something. I don't know what it is, but I'm looking for some way of putting the brakes on here till we find out more.
If, through you, Mr. Mayor, if council wanted to put the brakes on cannabis retail sales, option E is the option you would want to choose. It prohibits cannabis retail sales in the county, and we could have that in our bylaw up until council wanted us to bring something back. I will caution council that that does go against good planning, as that does tread into the realm of people zoning, because it's like saying you can't sell chocolate bars in those stores, but you can sell it in other stores. So it's that kind of a comparison. However, it would put the brakes on all of this until we're ready to address it in a different way.
I think that's what we're trying to do here. At least I feel that if we're going to allow it and I call it a wholesale operation, I don't think that can hurt us if we can change it later and look at some retail outlets. I don't know. Something tells me we have to wait until the province comes down with whatever they're coming down with before we jump into this. I'm sorry. That's the way I feel about it.
Thank you. Councillor Geisens?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to take my name off of that, what you have, I think you have. I'm looking at this, and the reason I'm saying that, after looking at everything that's here, we're talking convenience stores, country stores, department stores, retail stores, specialist event sales, supermarkets, and tourist and retail establishment. So to me, I think it should be, I guess, looked after a heck of a lot better. That if everybody in Norfolk County can get into that, we're going to have a lot of marijuana being sold all over the place and nobody's going to get anywhere. I think that we need to put it somewhere that is not going to take, we have to decide as to where do we want to see it. And I think the answer would be that we wait until the province comes along back in April and says, well, this is what we're going to do. And theoretically, that's why I'm pulling my motion. Thank you.
Okay, you have taken your name off the motion. I still have a seconder, Columbus. What's Councillor Columbus?
Ditto as seconder of that
Okay,
motion.
well, then we don't have a motion. I probably shouldn't let you, I shouldn't have let Councillor Geisen speak once we don't have a motion. So you're taking your name off. So what's your direction here? Councillor Oliver, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to ask staff another question, if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
And Matt, what would be the implications, negative or otherwise, if council were to essentially select option D, which would be to select certain zones where retail sales of marijuana would be permitted, and that we would specify it would be in the general industrial zone where we know the production facilities can or could take place, and perhaps service commercial as another zone. And I envision that as the strip malls such as we might have out on the Queensway, for example. I'm not sure whether that's service commercial or not, but what would be the negative implications, or is it too restrictive if we were to go for option D and specify those two zones at this initial stage?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, council can choose any zones they wish. Planning staff would need to look into maybe what would be the most appropriate zones. However, it's up to council where they'd want to see it. The implications would be it's the same idea as option E, where we're starting to tread into the waters of people zoning, that's all.
Councillor Black, I'm looking for direction. We're certainly not going to get in any debate. We need something to debate, and that would be a motion. Go ahead.
Looking for advice from staff, but I want the prohibition one. That's what I want to put on as a motion, but is there something else that needs to be included in that? Like receiving
well, information I've already got, so.
Yeah, receiving his information. Do you need the second one plus the E?
Do you wish, I'm a little nervous asking Councillor Black if he would want staff to prepare a report. Because I know how much you love him. What is your,
So I was asking a question of staff, whether
Go ahead.
or not, what exactly would you need in this motion along with the prohibition E?
Yeah, so if council wishes to proceed with option E, which is prohibiting it in the county, what would happen next is staff would write a bylaw, which would come back. We would define what a cannabis retail store or something to that effect. We would define it in our bylaw, and it would simply just not be a permitted use in any of the zones. And if somebody wanted to establish that use, they would need to come to council for a zoning bylaw amendment. So another thing that we could add, and I don't know if this is an option, and I'd have to talk to the county clerk about this, is if you did choose option E and we came back with a bylaw, we could also look at the possibility of doing an interim control bylaw for cannabis retail sales. Municipalities have that option, but it's like that nuclear button. You can only press it so many times. And I don't recall where we are with the timing of when the last time we did it.
We ran into trouble with that.
Mr. Clerk, you want to clarify?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, so the province has currently announced that they're going to give municipalities the option to opt out or opt in. So you do have a bylaw method, but you could just pass a motion anticipating the decision that the province will allow council to do. You could pass a bylaw to say that Norfolk County opts out of the retail sale of cannabis. And then when the province comes down and says, do you want to opt out or opt in, we have that already in file in the minutes and we can provide it. There could potentially be, the next term of council may have a kick at the can on that, but it'd be quicker. You don't have to hold a public hearing unless the province comes down and dictates that that's a part of the requirement for doing that.
Okay, well, it sounds, based on staff's advice, my motion would be to receive this report as information and, according to the province, opt out at this time. And then, if you get a seconder, speak to it, I guess.
So receives information and that the county opt out?
Opt out.
Yes? Out of retail sales?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so I have that the staff report be received as information and that the county opt out of retail sales. The other one is which, sorry, I gave that to you. Oh, yeah. I guess I should just look. And the second part, that planning staff be directed to amend. Councillor Black, okay with that second paragraph as written?
As long as staff's all right with that, that's...
Okay with that, Matt?
Just to be clear, the second paragraph is being kept in.
Kept in, yes.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Now, I would need a seconder before we discuss this. Councillor Sonnenberg.
If I could speak to it.
Councillor Black, please.
Well, I think everybody's feeling this. It's just the province doesn't know what they're doing. So how the heck can we know what we're doing? And I understand what staff are saying, and they need to say that. But at least I think this option puts it on hold until the province gets more details figured out, and maybe staff can do some more work and look at other areas and what they're doing. And then at some point, as you suggested, maybe the next council will deal with this. The opt-out might change to something different at that time.
Thank you, Councillor Columbus.
Yes, I'm going to support that. And one concern I have, though, is that might be fueling the underground market in this sale of cannabis. And I like the idea of what Matt mentioned, that the applicant can still come forward for a zoning amendment. Is that right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if you are opting to not allow this cannabis sales by opting out, it's not even an option to come in for a zoning bylaw amendment. You would be effectively creating a dry zone in Norfolk County.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Councillor Brunton, to the motion, please.
Speaking to the motion here, Mayor Luke, you mentioned an interim control bylaw. Is that the same as we're doing here in essence? Because we did that with the adult entertainment things till we knew more information. Is this similar, or what, this motion, does it cover that, or no?
Mr. Cribbs?
So this is not the same as an interim control bylaw, which this council cannot institute at this point in time. You're still statute barred from instituting any interim control bylaw. But this is, whether you choose to do it or not, it's your decision, but this is a lawful, the suggestion, the potential motion on the board would technically be lawful. It's not a control bylaw. It's a statement of your intent, of this council's intent, if passed. And as Mr. Griselle has indicated, our best information at this point in time, the province is welcome to change its mind, but our best information from them is that municipalities across Ontario will be given the choice. And if you've already elected to make a choice, then we can effectively plug and play something approved by this council into that matrix, we believe, unless they put some weird rules on it in plain English.
What does that mean at a later date we can't change? What if we want to establish some retail outlets at a later date? Does it allow us to do that if we pass this motion now?
To be clear, Councillor, amongst other things, when we have the election next month and a new council takes a seat, none of the rules, the next council will have the capacity to vary your decision. It can do that firstly because the election clears, we always have these rules on whether you can reconsider something and all of that sort of, you get a blank slate.
Okay.
That's probably the strongest reason, but we also think the province will put a new regime in. So it could be undone, the bell could be unrung by the next council, regardless of which way you go, I might add. Come January, there'll be a fresh slate.
Let's take the next council. All I'm saying is, can they go to retail outlets even though we pass this bylaw? Yes or no? Yes?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any time. Councillor Height.
Well, thank you, Mayor Luke. I need something cleared up, okay? So I've heard from staff that if we pass this today, we have to pick one of those options, A through E, or we could have retail outlets springing up, okay? Now, on page 1 of our report, it says the province will launch a consultation program, and until April 1st, 2019, physical retail sales will be strictly prohibited and illegal. Which one is it? Can we pass something, yet the province says that we're doing it illegally? Because that doesn't make sense to me whatsoever.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're establishing the zoning framework so that once provincially they have determined how they want to roll out the retail sale of cannabis, the zoning bylaw is in a position where owners can get business licenses and carry on right away. We're trying to prevent any backlog of the establishment of new stores and that sort of thing. So we're trying to preemptively get ourselves in a position for business. for April 1st.
In this instance, I feel that it's the cart before the horse. It's not, it's order of operations. We're talking, it's illegal until April 1st. So I don't see why we're going through all this. I don't see that if we pass something, it's allowed when the province says it's illegal.
It's been moved by Councillor Block, seconded by Councillor Sonnenberg, that this report 18-90 be received as information and that Norfolk County opt out of the retail sales, and also that planning staff be directed to amend section 3.21 of the zoning bylaw 1Z 2014 to add to the list of sensitive land uses the required separation distances from a cannabis production and processing use. Further discussion? I hear none. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? That is carried. I am now going to go right to our deputation. Just before we have a short break. Our deputation that was scheduled for 40 minutes ago is Mr. Henry Clausen. He is here to request of us the establishment of a new cemetery. Mr. Clausen, please. Sir, if you'd come to the microphone. Mr. Height, do you want to make sure that is operational for Mr. Clausen? And Henry, we apologize for making you wait.
Well, that's
we don't
all right.
normally take 15 minutes to do a report. Well, I shouldn't say that. I just didn't think it would take that long, so my apologies to you. You have 10 minutes. If you get to the 9-minute point, I will just kind of say, time to wrap her up the next minute, so we're all ears. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm a trustee from the Old Colony Church in Walsingham. We don't have a cemetery, and so we're asking, see if we get permission from the councillors to establish a new cemetery. Like, we got the zoning for that and all, so we're just asking for approval.
And just to clarify, this is on the current church property, I
Yes,
believe?
it is.
I saw that on the map. Okay, are you open for questions?
Sure.
Okay, questions for this gentleman? We'll be dealing with this after your deputation.
Mhm.
Any questions? Simple request, okay. I have, first of all, a motion that is moved by Height and seconded by Columbus that the deputation of Henry Clausen regarding request to establish a new cemetery be received as information. Those in favor? That's carried. And Henry, if you just take a seat for a moment, we'll proceed. Thank you. I have a second motion that says that Councillor Height has moved and Councillor Columbus has seconded that staff be directed to advertise and hold a public meeting respecting the request of Mr. Clausen for a new cemetery. Discussion on this motion, Councillor Black.
Well, I was thinking that we should refer this to staff because I have no idea what the legal process is in establishing a new cemetery. So through you to the appropriate staff member, whoever that may be, what is the right process to follow? Is this it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's similar to the crematorium issue that we dealt with before. So we're the first stage of approval. However, there is a lot of there's some property owners that back on to this lot, as you can see from the picture. So it's just a good idea for us to hold a public hearing, get some informal kind of memo or comments from planning staff on the appropriate zoning and to allow people the right to comment before council makes a decision on what is in the best public interest. If you recall, that was the issue with the crematorium, determining if it was in the public interest.
Is this the correct motion?
Well, this motion is
That's okay?
to advertise to the public that we're holding a public meeting. That's the first step, I think, is what the clerk has indicated. Good question. Any other questions? Councillor Sonnenberg.
Well, I do know that cemeteries are regulated by the province. I'm wondering if this is the place to start, or do you start with the province? Does anybody know?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, some form of municipal approval is required as part of the provincial application. So we're a component of that application.
Any other discussion? I'll call the question. Those in favor? Mr. Clausen, that's carried. Mr. Clausen, what's happened here is this will start your request for a new cemetery in motion, and the clerk will be advertising for a public meeting which will allow neighboring properties to have some input to this request of yours. That's the first step, and then we'll see where that goes. Thank you, sir. Okay. I think we're going to take this time to have a 15-minute break, and at 4 o'clock we'll start our public meeting. Thank you.